Hi, Dan here, and welcome to Fun Kids Science Weekly Reach for the Sky Special, the podcast that explores the future of aviation, from the design and sustainability of future planes to the people who keep them flying and make sure our experience is top-notch. In this podcast, we're meeting vertical aerospace and exploring the technology of vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. Imagine zooming above traffic jams instead of being stuck in them. That's the dream behind this company, who are flipping everyday travel on its head, or rather up into the sky. They're building amazing flying machines that lift straight up, like a helicopter, but fly like a plane. And it's all done with zero emissions, so they're clean and planet-friendly too. The idea started when someone was trapped in a 2-hour traffic jam and thought, well, there has to be a better way of getting around. Our cities are jam-packed, noisy and polluted, so Vertical Aerospace decided the best way is up. Their star creation is the VX4. It's an amazing electric aircraft that can carry 4 passengers and a pilot, taking off and landing vertically. It's quiet, it's safe, and it makes flying to work or school sound like something from a strange sci-fi film, really. And soon, they'll even have a hybrid version that can fly even further. Vertical Aerospace is on a mission to make the sky part of our daily commute, and to do it without harming the planet. But to start us off, here's Amy to give us the lowdown on some of the technology that's helping us fly in new and exciting ways.
Amy Aviation, reaching for the sky.
Hi, Amy Aviation here. I'm with Zac and... we're stuck in traffic. With towns and cities getting busier, getting across them can take a long time.
Tell me about it. I think it would be quicker to orbit the moon.
Well, how about skipping the roads entirely and going up?
Wait, you mean like flying cars?
Not quite cars, but something just as cool. VTOLs, vertical takeoff and landing vehicles.
Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
These vehicles take off vertically, straight up, then fly like a plane before landing again vertically.
So basically, sky taxis.
Exactly. By the year 2030, you might be hopping into an air taxi that lifts off from a vertiport and glides over city rooftops.
I'm calling it Zac Cab Air. Catchy, right?
A VTOL taxi will probably carry up to 6 people and travel up to 300 miles on a single electric charge.
Wait, electric? Like no petrol, no jet fuel?
Yep, all electric, which means they're quiet, efficient and much better for the environment.
Cool, so no mega noisy engines blasting everyone's ears off.
Exactly, and because they can take off and land vertically, you don't need runways, just a small landing pad on a roof, or maybe near a train station. Imagine this. You hop off a train when it arrives at a city, walk to a vertiport, and then zip through the sky to your destination.
No traffic, no delays, I'm in.
To keep things safe and keep noise and emissions to a minimum in populated areas, air taxis will follow special flight corridors, sort of like invisible sky roads that guide them over parks and rivers rather than built-up areas.
Sky roads, like cloudy motorways. So, are air taxis already flying?
Well, they're not quite ready for takeoff yet, but several companies are testing designs. Most have multiple rotors for vertical lift and safety, like quadcopters, that's 4 rotors, hexacopters, 6 rotors, and octocopters, 8 rotors. Some designs have rotors that can tilt to provide both vertical and horizontal thrust. Other designs use rotors for vertical lift, and then fixed wings and engines for horizontal movement. And then there's some with something called vectored thrust. These have multiple engines that can be pointed in different directions to control lift and thrust, and are more manoeuvrable than multi-rotor designs.
Wow, so many cool ideas. I guess VTOLs won't just be used for carrying people. They can make deliveries as well.
Exactly, from home deliveries to medical emergencies. There could be a flying ambulance to get someone to surgery. They're super useful in places where regular planes just can't go.
But what's the catch? Sounds almost too good to be true.
Well, there's still a few big things that need to be sorted out, like making sure batteries are sufficiently large to store enough energy to power the VTOL, whilst also safe in day-to-day operations.
I suppose they always have to create safe flight routes over built-up areas, training pilots how to fly them and creating emergency procedures to make sure everyone is comfortable and most importantly safe, whether a passenger or someone on the ground below.
That's where the many experts come into play, to plan, test and improve systems every step of the way.
So we're talking about flying taxis that are cleaner, quieter, quicker and don't even need roads.
You got it. And with every test flight, we're one step closer to a sky full of soaring, sustainable air travel. And that's it for today's Flight of Fancy. Except it's not fancy, it's for real. Catch you again soon.
Amy Aviation, Reaching for the Sky. Created with support from a CAA Reach for the Sky Challenge grant. Find out more at funkidslive.com/Amy.
Thanks, Amy. How cool would it be to take an aircraft to school? Aviation is full of innovations, and to find out more, we met up with Simon at Vertical Aerospace. So, you are the chief test pilot at Vertical Aerospace. Could you just introduce yourself and explain a bit about your role and the work you do?
Right, yeah, so my name's Simon Davis, chief test pilot at Vertical Aerospace, and it's a company that's making an electric vertical takeoff and landing air taxi. So take 4 people plus a pilot from a regional airport, say, to a city, or maybe airport to city centre, if you're going on your holidays, something like that. My job at Vertical is to lead the testing of the aircraft. So we take an aircraft that's really quite new, it's never flown before. We do lots of work with the people that have designed the aircraft to make sure that it's going to be easy to fly and safe to fly. We get involved with all the ground testing, and then eventually we take the aircraft flying. We have to build out the flight envelope to make sure that it's safe in all the conditions that it might encounter in the real world. So different wind conditions, different heights, different speeds, to make sure it's safe. And we have to make sure that we can do that testing safely as well.
And then I'm just reading through your own personal experience within the flying industry. Could you just tell us a bit about your experience and the types of aircraft you've flown?
Right, so I started off flying light aircraft. I got my private pilot's license when I was 17. I got a scholarship from the RAF, the Royal Air Force in the UK. And then I studied aeronautical engineering at university. So I trained as an engineer and then joined the RAF straight after university and trained as a fighter pilot. So I've got an aeronautical engineering background and was a fighter pilot in the RAF. I flew Tornado as an instructor and examiner. And then I was very lucky. I got sent to the USA to train as a test pilot with the US Navy. So I got to fly lots of cool F-jets, fast fighters with afterburning engines, as well as all sorts of other different aeroplanes, helicopters, vintage jets, Second World War bomber, loads of really exciting aeroplanes to learn all about how different aeroplanes fly, what makes an aircraft nice to fly or good at its job. And then I left the military about 10 years ago, and I've been working mostly with smaller companies since then. So I've flown some helicopters, I've flown some airships, worked for an airship company for a little while. I've worked at the Empire Test Pilot School, training test pilots. And then I've been at Vertical Aerospace working on this brand new field of electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft for about 5 years now.
Now, you've kind of touched on it there, but what would you say is the most exciting part of being a test pilot?
Oh, that's tricky. I think it's the challenge of taking completely new technologies and working out how to fly aircraft that use those technologies safely. Because you really have to think hard about how everything works, what might happen when things go wrong, how they might fail, and how you can stay safe even if the bad thing happens. So it's a really tricky problem, and you have to understand a lot about the whole aircraft. And I really enjoy that challenge.
And how safe is it? Have things gone wrong? How dangerous can it be being a test pilot?
So lots of people say, you're a test pilot, you must be a real thrill seeker and love risk and danger. We're really boring. Test pilots are really boring. We obsess about risk and making sure that we keep ourselves and importantly the aeroplanes safe, because we tend to have just one or two prototype aircraft. They tend to be quite precious, so you have to look after them. So we obsess about safety all the time. That's really the core of our job. It's taking something that might be quite dangerous and working out a way to do it safely.
And then how does someone become a test pilot? I imagine they're a pilot first and then they're a test pilot?
Yeah, that's generally the traditional route. Is you train as a pilot, you get some experience on maybe flying big passenger aeroplanes or helicopters or whatever it might be, or in the military, flying combat aircraft. And then you add the test pilot specialty afterwards. Not everybody does it that way, but that's kind of the most usual route. Yeah.
Okay. And so drones and vertical takeoff and landing vehicles like sky taxis look to be pretty big going into the future. Can you explain what is an electrical vertical takeoff and landing aircraft?
So an eVTOL, an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, is an aircraft that takes off and lands a bit like a drone or a helicopter, but really more like a drone, and then flies along. In the case of our aircraft, the vertical aircraft, it's got a wing, it flies like an aeroplane. So if you can picture it, it's got a 15-meter wing, so it's quite big, and then it's got 8 motors with propellers on. There are four in front of the wing, 4 behind, and the motors all point upwards for takeoff and landing. So it takes off like a big drone, and then the front 4 propellers tilt forwards to make it fly along fast like a normal aeroplane. And then obviously you land and land vertically again. And the plan is to do it with electric motors. We've got 2 different products. One will just be using batteries, so no emissions at the point of use, really clean, really nice to use in cities. And then we're planning on building a hybrid one, which I think we'll use something like a petrol motor to provide a bit of additional range to the batteries as well. So it's really exciting technology. It combines lots of technologies from electric cars, from advances in controls and computer technology and battery technology. So it's a really exciting thing to be working on.
And we're going to hear a bit more about the tech in a minute. But first, as we've touched on drones, let's hear more about their history in aviation. Drones, or UAVs, that's unmanned aerial vehicles, have been around in ideas or experiments for over a century. In 1849, Austria floated hundreds of balloons carrying explosives over Venice. Early, very basic, unmanned weapons. Fast forward to World War I, Britain's aerial target tested in March 1917. It was a small radio-controlled aircraft that flew under ground control. In October 1918, the US tested the Kettering bug, an unmanned aerial torpedo that could fly towards a fixed destination. Between the wars and during World War II, drones became more advanced. Radio-controlled target drones were used for practicing anti-aircraft gunners, for recon, that's spying, and even as flying bombs or gliders in some cases. After World War II, drone work continued, mostly with military eyes on them. Later, from the end of the 20th into the 21st century, drones began to spread into civilian life. Agriculture for surveying crops, spraying and monitoring soil, also filmmaking, delivery, mapping and environmental monitoring. Today, drones are tiny and smart, often with GPS, computer vision and more, helping people in many ways. From farmers checking fields to scientists studying wildlife, and you might even have a toy drone yourself. So for most of us, I think when we think of planes taking off, we'll think of a long, big runway and the planes slowly flying off into the sky. Could you explain maybe the benefits or the points of what you were trying to achieve with a plane that takes off and then lands vertically?
Right, so helicopters have been around for a while. But helicopters are really, really expensive to operate because they have really complex gearboxes and transmissions. There's lots of components that are really critical, have to be replaced quite often. It makes them really expensive to operate. And they're also quite noisy. So but they're really useful because they can go to places where you haven't got a big runway. So a heliport on top of a building or a hospital, or if you want to land at a nice country hotel or in a car park somewhere, you can do that with a helicopter because you don't need a big runway and an airport. But the key thing with our electric vertical takeoff and landing aeroplane is going to be just as safe as a big transport aircraft that you might take on your holidays, because it's got lots of different motors. So even if one of those breaks, you can still carry on flying safely. And it's going to be nice and quiet in operation. Makes a sort of low buzzing noise, a kind of noise, rather than the whop 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 of a helicopter. And then on top of that, it's going to be really cheap to operate because the electric motors are really simple. We've only got one moving part. There's no gearboxes or lubrication systems or anything to look after. So it's a bit like an electric car that you don't really have to service very much. It's going to be really cheap to use.
Is that with a pilot or will it be unmanned?
Yeah, we're planning to have a pilot in our aircraft. We might look at developing an unpiloted version for perhaps for cargo, but that's a little way off still. That's just something that might happen in the future.
And then what will these types of aircraft be used for?
Well, I think, first of all, it's going to be used to move passengers around. And most of our customers, and we've got orders for 1,500 aircraft from customers around the world, from Japan, from the USA, from Spain. And most of them are scheduled airlines. So they're people that have an aeroplane business, and they want a new way of getting people to the airport to use their big aircraft. So it might be that you get in the UK, maybe you get in a vertical VX4 at an airplane that's really close to your house, and then you fly to Heathrow to get on a bigger airplane to go on holiday. That would be a typical use case. The other thing that these aircraft would be really good at is just solving tricky journeys, maybe city to city where you've got a river or a bit of sea, a bit of ocean in the way, but there's no bridge. You could perhaps use our aircraft to solve those journeys, or between two islands. That's another application. One of our customers in Spain plan to use our aircraft around the Balearic Islands, Ibiza and those islands there. So it's really exciting. We're going to be able to solve difficult journeys for people and get people moving in new ways.
And how do you make sure all this is going to be safe? I'm picturing almost like a taxi service, like a little highway, a motorway with cars. How do you make sure all of this is safe?
We have to observe all of the normal rules of the air. So we use just regular air traffic control and comply with all the normal procedures to get in and out of airports. And importantly, we use all the same sort of safety systems and procedures that make aviation safe for people to use today. So we're not kind of reinventing the wheel in terms of how we operate the aircraft. There's lots of new technology. In time, when we have more drones and more eVTOL aircraft in the skies, I think we'll have to do more to automate things like air traffic control to help cope with the volume of traffic. Once things like drone deliveries become more common, that's going to be increasingly important. But to start with, just baby steps. We just follow the normal rules and keep everyone really safe. And safety is really it's the most important thing about everything we do.
And how far away do you think it is until we see it also being used as a regular means of transport, almost like we can catch a taxi these days?
That is a really great question. People have been talking about eVTOL aircraft for about 10 years. And it's always, it's nearly here, it's nearly here. Well, actually, I think we're at a point, if you look at what we're doing now, so we've been flying our aircraft around the Cotswolds in Oxfordshire, our home base is at Cotswold Airport. We've been flying around the countryside, around the airport, around the countryside of the Cotswolds for about a year now. These things are becoming real. They really are. We've got competitors in the US that are at a similar stage and have really advanced prototypes, or they're working towards certifying their aircraft. So I think they're almost here. So so at Vertical, we're working towards 2028. So that's 3 years from now. We'll have the aircraft available for our customers to use. So in that sort of 2 to 3 to 4 year timescale, I think we're really going to start to see them being used to move people around our cities.
So that'll be very cool. I just want to touch on batteries, because during this series, we've spoken a lot about using alternative fuels as a means of powering the planes. And when we speak to pilots, they always say batteries will work great on smaller aircraft, but it's not really viable on bigger aircrafts. So can you just talk about the type of batteries that you're using and how you're making sure they're efficient and how that's progressing?
The real advantage of the batteries in our application is that for short range flights, so under 100 miles, it's quite effective. You can do it, first of all, and then secondly, it makes it really cheap to operate, because petrol's expensive. Electricity to recharge the aircraft is pretty cheap. So we think that's really important. And also, we really care about the zero emissions thing as well. So we can keep our aircraft nice and clean and environmentally friendly. That's great. And there are always questions around sustainability of the whole aircraft. We're really confident that as long as you've got a nice clean source of electricity, actually you can pay that back, that carbon debt from manufacture back pretty quickly, actually. If you want to go further, then I think a mix of batteries and perhaps a generator with a petrol engine or a gas turbine, or something like a hydrogen fuel cell to generate electricity from hydrogen is still the way to go. To do longer range flights with the batteries requires really big improvements in the amount of energy you can store in batteries, because they're quite heavy still. So I think that's an accurate assessment. Batteries is really great for short range. At the moment, we need to use a mix or other technologies.
And is that where you foresee the batteries being useful? On those smaller, shorter journeys, maybe 100-mile radius kind of thing?
Battery-only eVTOLs, yes. Our hybrid aircraft really has the capacity to go a lot further. We're looking at up to, it could be as much as 1,000 miles. We're still developing the concept.
Yeah. And now just a couple of fun questions. What's the coolest thing you've done working in aviation? Maybe some personal stories or a moment that sticks out?
I'd have to say flying the Vertical VX4 in its aeroplane mode for the first time. That was something I'll always remember. We took off, we did it in May. We took off on a beautiful, still summer's morning. I got to fly around the Cotswolds in this brand new aeroplane that we'd not flown like that. But we'd done hovering flying before, but we'd not flown in airplane mode before at all. So getting to be the first person to have that experience was absolutely unforgettable. It was really, really amazing thing. Real privilege.
And then what's your favourite airplane? It can be anything.
It's too hard to choose one. I'm going to be greedy. I'm going to choose two. When I was in America, I got to fly an F-15, which is a big twin-engine fighter jet. It can go anywhere, do anything. It looks beautiful. It's really capable. It's fast as well, and also I'd always loved those as a kid as well. And so real childhood ambition to do that. And then I get to fly some vintage airplanes as well. So I fly an RAF SE5 that took part in the First World War. It's an actual genuine 110-year-old aeroplane, and I get to fly that occasionally and display it, and that's a really special experience as well.
And now, what is the most intriguing part of a plane for you? Which parts?
I say it's the flight controls. As a test pilot, we get really involved in how the aircraft flies, how it feels to the pilot, whether it's nice to fly, whether the flight controls make it easy to do the job it is supposed to do, whether it's an aeroplane that takes people on their holidays, or an aircraft that perhaps does surveillance missions or something like that. This whole wide range of roles that the aircraft do. And it's always surprising how small changes in the flight controls can completely change how useful an aircraft is, or how easy or how nice it is to land, for example. You make really small changes on an old airplane. Just introducing a spring somewhere in the pitch control unit in the elevator system can completely change how it feels to the pilot. I think it's a really fascinating mix of the pure engineering and the kind of psychological aspects of having a human fly the aeroplane.
And if you're going to design a plane of the future, what would you make sure it had?
Tricky. I think in the future we're going to have aeroplanes that are increasingly simple to fly. So you use a bit more automation and make sure that even if things go wrong on the aeroplane, they stay nice and simple to fly. I think that's probably the biggest change we'll make in the next sort of 10 or 20 years. I think that's really important. We help the pilots, because airplanes still have accidents, and it's really sad. But I'd like to see airplanes that are safer, and I would start with helping the pilots by making sure that even if stuff breaks, even stuff fails, that they're still easy to fly, that they're still safe to land again.
And do you see the pilots sticking around? I know there's been talks of unmanned aircraft and unmanned flights, especially now with AI. Do you think something like that isn't too far away?
I think technically the technology pretty much exists to do that today. So the challenge is, I think there are two real challenges. The first is, how do we prove that they're going to be safe to carry people and passengers? So we have to create the rules to operate those aeroplanes, and that's actually really quite difficult to do. The secondly is, for me, it's like when you ask people, would you want to fly on an aeroplane that doesn't have a pilot? Most people will say no, because that it's very much away from our experience. So I think this is a longer term thing. We don't even have self-driving cars. I've never been in a self-driving taxi. I've been on a train that doesn't have a driver, and that's becoming increasingly common. But we don't have cars on our roads yet that can drive themselves. And I think it will take a little bit of time for people to get used to the idea of not having a pilot on board. So I think it's a little way off just yet.
As a kid, were there any clues that you'd end up in a career in aviation? Were there any telltale signs?
I think there are lots. I was a complete aeroplane nerd. I loved everything that I when I was younger, I loved anything I could get my hands on that I could make fly. Paper airplanes, kites, model rockets, remote controlled airplanes, anything that flew, I absolutely loved. I'd nag my parents to take me to air shows. And then also I just loved building anything out of Lego. It was mainly airplanes and spaceships. So yeah, I think the clues are there from an early age.
And then what about subjects at school? What were you studying that helped you out with this career?
I always enjoyed physics. So the understanding how the world works was something that I was always really fascinated in. So physics and engineering and the hard sciences, rather than the squishy ones, were very much my thing. That's what I enjoyed at school.
And then finally, do you have any words of advice and guidance that you would give to kids considering a career in aviation?
Well, firstly, I'd say go for it. It's such an exciting industry, and it's such an exciting time. I think it's the most exciting time in aviation in the last 60 or 70 years at least. We've got all these new technologies, electrification of aeroplanes. It's just such an exciting time to be in aviation. I would say just read as much as you can about aviation and technology. Get to understand what you like about the world around you or aviation, and find people to ask lots of questions of. So if you've got an airport nearby, just go hang out there. Ask lots of questions. People in aviation are lovely. They love talking about what they do as well. So read lots, ask lots of questions, and that'll give you the best possible step.
Brilliant. Thanks, Simon. As we've been finding out, there's hundreds of amazing careers in aviation, from the pilots in the sky to the ground crew, well, on the ground, but perhaps one of the roles that you'll see the most when you're on holiday is the cabin crew. It might seem like a glamorous job, but it's one that requires a lot of training. Let's find out more. Have you ever dreamed of zooming around the world as part of an airline's cabin crew? It's a job full of travel, teamwork, and helping passengers stay safe and happy. To get started, most UK airlines ask for at least 5 GCSEs at grades 9 to 4, including English and maths. After school, many people gain experience in customer service jobs to build confidence and people skills. You'll also need to be over 18, be able to swim, and pass a medical check and background security checks. Once hired, you get special cabin crew training from your airline, learning about safety, first aid, and how to handle emergencies on board. Big UK airlines like British Airways and EasyJet run regular recruitment programs, and they look for friendly, calm, and helpful people. If you love flying and enjoy helping others, being in the cabin crew could be your ticket to the skies. And with that, it's time for us to head back to departures. I hope you can join us again soon. Fun Kids Science Weekly Reach for the Sky special, created with support from a CAA Reach for the Sky Challenge grant. Find out more at funkidslive.com.